Hello and welcome. My name is ShamaGanesh, and in today's lecture I would like to share with you the concept of ecosystem. The biosphere is occupied by a vast variety of organisms, from tiny microscopic forms to large macroscopic plants and animals. The occurrence of these diverse forms of life is due to a gradual and a continuous process of organic evolution. Live alone and like it is a slogan which no organisms like to adopt. Every organism is under the influence of both the living and non-living environments. Every organism must depend on its environment for their vital materials and energy. Every organism must interact and contribute to its environment for its well-being, and no organism can live in isolation. The environment supplies materials and energy requirements and provides living condition to the biological community. A biological community interacting with the non-living environment is called an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be natural or artificial, temporary or permanent. A pond, a coral reef, a grassland, a village, a forest, an aquarium can all be regarded as ecosystems. Thus, an ecosystem may be defined as any structural and functional unit of the biosphere where there is interaction and flow of energy between living and the non-living components. Ecosystems can be recognized as self-regulatory and self-sustaining units of landscape. The concept of ecosystem was first put forth by Sir Arthur Tansley in 1935. In nature, two major types of ecosystem may be distinguished in the biosphere as terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. Forests, grassland and desert are main examples of terrestrial ecosystem, while ponds, lakes, rivers, streams, estuaries, seas and oceans represent the aquatic ecosystem. All the ecosystems of the biosphere are connected to one another. For example, river ecosystem is connected to the ocean ecosystem, and a small ecosystem of dead logs is a part of the large forest ecosystem. However, human activities may modify natural ecosystems into man-made or anthropogenic ecosystem. For example, natural forests have been cut and the land converted to tree plantation or agricultural systems. The living organisms, that is biotic components, and non-living components, that is abiotic factors of an ecosystem, are very closely interconnected and form the structural and functional components of an ecosystem. Thus, both components are a kind of inseparable entity. Let us learn about these components one by one. The abiotic components of an ecosystem are physical and chemical factors. Physical factors are soil, light, temperature, rainfall, humidity, etc., which are known to influence the distribution and activities of biotic components. Chemical factors include essential organic and inorganic chemicals available in the environment required for the biotic components. All living organisms will have a range of tolerance to environmental factors. That is, organisms will be able to survive provided temperature, humidity or other factors are maintained within the critical limits. If an environmental factor essential for life is absent or depleted below critical minimum, or if it exceeds the maximum tolerable level for the species, it becomes a limiting factor. Thus, the abiotic factors regulate the dispersal, growth and reproduction of the component populations of particular ecosystem. The biotic components of an ecosystem are populations of living animals, plants and microbes. These biotic elements together form the communities of the ecosystem. The biotic elements are distinguished as autotrophs and heterotrophs. All organisms require energy for their life processes, and this energy is produced through the process of photosynthesis exhibited by forms which have light sensitive pigments called chlorophyll. The autotrophs trap the solar energy in their chlorophyll to synthesize sugars from carbon dioxide, a process known as photosynthesis. Therefore, autotrophs are known as producers. In a majority of natural ecosystems, producers are invariably green plants. In terrestrial ecosystems, these are for the most part the familiar flowering plants that constitute the dominant forms of vegetation. In aquatic ecosystems, the producers are the microscopic free floating organisms known as phytoplankton, and more particularly the diatoms. Heterotrophs are forms that depend on producers either directly or indirectly for their food. Therefore, they are known as consumers. In an ecosystem, consumers are represented by animals based on their nutritional relationship with the producers. Consumers are primary, secondary and tertiary consumers. Primary consumers are those animals that obtain their food by feeding directly on the plants. They are therefore known as herbivores. Secondary consumers are those animals that obtain their food by eating primary consumers. They are therefore known as primary carnivores. Tertiary consumers are those animals that obtain their food by feeding on secondary consumers, which in turn have fed on primary consumers. Thus, they are known as secondary carnivores. Decomposers are those heterotrophs which obtain their food by decomposing the dead bodies of producers and consumers. In the process, they release some inorganic substances which are recycled into the environment, so that they are again available to the producers. Since decomposers clean the environment by this way, they are also known as scavengers. In any ecosystem, decomposers are represented by bacteria and fungi. Every ecosystem has some functional values which keep the component parts running together. Various functions performed by the structural components of the ecosystem ensure persistence of the ecosystem. For example, green leaves of the plants make food, while roots absorb nutrients from the soil. Herbivores feed on various parts of the plants and in turn serve as food for carnivores. After the death of both plants and animals, decomposers break down or decompose their bodies into simpler inorganic substances which can be used by the producers again. Thus, the major functional attributes or values of the ecosystem are productivity, energy flow, decomposition, nutrients recycling, development and stabilization. The amount of energy involved in the interaction of ecosystem is expressed in a quantitative relationship known as productivity. Productivity expresses the functional activities of an ecosystem. Truly, productivity is the rate, the amount of energy commonly measured in terms of units of heat, energy or calories produced in an unit area, which is generally 1 square meter per unit time, which is generally 1 year. Energy flow refers to the transfer of energy from one trophic level to the other along the food chain. Producers and different categories of consumers represent trophic levels of an ecosystem. Producers always occupy the first trophic level, while the primary, secondary and tertiary consumers occupy the successive trophic levels. The linear relationship between the producers and the consumers, where there is transfer of energy from one trophic level to the next trophic level with the process of eating and being eaten, is known as food chain. Decomposition refers to the breakdown of dead organisms to generate inorganic nutrients that can be recycled again, which refers to nutrient recycling. Development refers to the establishment of populations, and stabilization refers to resist changes. In the coming sessions, we will elaborate on the various types of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems that we saw today. Until then, goodbye.